So now that we are recording and live streaming, I want to welcome everyone to the main presentation of this meeting, both here on Zoom and live via live stream. The live stream is a good preview of a vidwheel creator network Zoom meetup, but if you want to get the full experience, join us at the next meeting, and that meeting's on November 18th at 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll be continuing our November theme of video podcasts with a presentation by Grant Talick titled Don't Let Your Content Fizzle and Die, It's Time to Repurpose. The event info will be published on the vidwheel company page on LinkedIn under the Events tab. Okay, so right now, this month is Video Podcast Month on the vidwheel Creator Network, and we're discussing throughout the month on the network and in these events, podcasting, specifically video podcasting. Personally, I think podcasts are one of the best video mediums, primarily because they're so easy to create highly valuable content. So many of you have heard me said it before, but kind of the long and short of it is all that you really have to do is talk to someone smarter than you and record it. Done. And it can be that easy to create high quality content. The hard part is finding the right guest. And we'll see if we get any comments or stuff about that tonight when we learn more about the medium by talking to podcaster and creator of the Room 9 podcast, Sean Cuddihy. Sean, thank you for taking time to speak with this group. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm as ready as I'm going to be, I guess.
All right. All right, it's good to have you. I'm going to spotlight you because you're just doing the video feed, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, first, Neil, thanks for thinking of me and inviting me here. I was actually kind of struggling in the beginning of this because, as I told you, I haven't done a ton of video podcasts, but as I've recently gotten more into it and doing it, I've really seen the benefits of it. And I guess I'm just going to share kind of my experience that I've had with it, the results I've seen from it, and things like that, because I haven't been doing it forever, but I have found that it helps not only so much more to get more eyes and ears, I should say, on my podcast in general, but it's also helped me. I felt like I've learned that they've gone hand in hand with each other, which has been pretty interesting to see, because I started off with just a podcast about 4 years ago. That would be now. I think I started about 4 years ago. And it was just podcast only. So I knew nothing about audio, and I had this crappy laptop and this crappy microphone, and I started with that. And then eventually I started doing a lot of freelance audio stuff and podcasting for mental health companies. And then I ended up getting into video. And so I got this camera, Panasonic GH5, and knew nothing about video, knew nothing about shutter speed, ISO, any of that stuff. And then I started teaching myself. So from that date, within about 2 years, I am now recently the lead content marketer at Lloyd, doing their taco trucks and their factories and their ice cream shop. So that's kind of my experience. It's been short, but I feel like I've crammed a lot in a small amount of time, and I've learned a lot in a small amount of time. So, I mean, I think everybody knows, like what I have found is video is taking over literally everything. Literally, it's everywhere. I think it's some high percentage is consumed on the internet. I think well above 70-80% of information taken in on the internet. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, because I'm just kind of making these numbers up.
I think it's 86 is what
80?
HubSpot's been pushing out there.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a ton of that. The content is all consumed video. So it's really, you kind of have to get into it no matter what you're doing. And what podcasting, doing video or not to do video, has really taught me is the difference between a listener and an audience. And I think the simplest difference in that is when people can see your face. I don't know about you guys, with COVID happening, with things changing, trying to find some positive out of it is at least I can still make eye contact with somebody. At least I can see their face. And I think that was one of the biggest sticking points for me to continue to do video podcasting. I think it was one of the biggest things that I've come across was finding the difference between that listener and audience. And an audience really becomes a group of people who end up supporting you more. I recently I did this a drag and drop website. So I have no idea how to do web design. It was very cheap web design for this gamer. He streams video games, and he paid me to do a website for him. And I found with his YouTube channel is where almost all his eyes comes from on his live streaming. And so that got me thinking about my podcast and how to do doing video and putting it up on YouTube. And that is where so many people have come to my podcast from. And I don't want to, like, I love coming up here. I do kind of, when I think of podcast numbers and what is an actual successful podcast, it depends on who you always compare yourself to, right? I think it's upwards to 1,000 downloads an episode. I did have Gary Vaynerchuk on, which was a big point for me. And that's having him on was one of the biggest things that I learned from all of this when I had him on was taking this long form video content and then cutting it up into small pieces and then repurposing it everywhere else. So even if you're not going to take this whole, 45-minute, 30-minute piece of video and put it up on the web, you can still take all these little conversations throughout that and repurpose that whole entire podcast essentially, or whatever those main points are, to push out onto the internet. And I have also, and I hate to say this as well, I have found that doing that with the clips using subtitles is a huge thing. As you're scrolling down social media, I know most of you guys see on your phone, it's on mute, the audio doesn't start. And to really have subtitles on your video has really helped me as well. I am going to get to one of the, which is kind of funny, one of the biggest keys that I have gotten from all this. But I've always felt like doing the video with the podcast it's a pain. I think some people have found that it's hard to learn to figure out how to even what an MP4 is, what an MOV file. I mean, there's so much that comes with doing the video, but the simple fact of just being able to hit record, you're recording your audio, do your audio separate, and you have your video. And even if it's just Zoom or Skype, being able to take that and push it up on your YouTube channel, up on your Instagram channel, whatever it is, LinkedIn. I know Neil we use LinkedIn with this video creator network a lot, and repurposing that is probably the biggest thing you can possibly do. What I have found, which isn't really even related to podcasting anymore, what I found is it can relate to everything, but it's really the execution on how you do things. And that is one of the biggest things that I have found over the last few years is it's not the most creative person who's successful, it's the person who executes the best. And when you can get yourself into a system and a routine and take all of that and apply it to what you want to do, it makes life a lot simpler, and you can pump out so much more content, whether that's podcasting and kind of even maybe I'm getting away from the topic of podcasting and getting in just video. But I mean, being able to take that and just throw a video up there, knowing next week I'm going to create this, I'm going to have this, and that, and you can put it up there, I think starts separating people from the rest. One of the biggest problems that I have found that I've had is consistently putting content up on a weekly basis. I mean, it is a pain. And you guys are all learning video. A lot of you have more experience than I do in video. So you guys know how big of a pain it is to consistently put content up. And having a podcast with video, I mean, gives you so much more content. And that was one of the biggest things that spiked my podcast, that spiked my growth on social media, and was able to bug Gary Vaynerchuk enough to come on my podcast was the fact that I had tons of content I could chop up and post randomly all the time. And I think that was probably one of the biggest keys to my success, in quotes, relatively speaking, over the last few years. And I would go out and say probably, I mean, when this is really off topic and I might never be invited back, ever to this network after talking about this. But one of the biggest keys that I have found in my life that has brought success to my podcast, that has brought success to my video career, that has brought success to my storytelling is becoming an introspective person and working on me. And once I got to know, as I get to know myself better, I have found over the years that I can learn how to teach myself better. And when I can teach myself better, I can grow faster. And when I grow faster, I become more successful. And that was probably one of the keys that I really wanted to hammer home, because I was thinking it's kind of, it's black and white, the argument of podcasting, video or not the video. Obviously, this is a video creator network. So to answer the question, obviously, yes, we should be doing some video for podcasting. But I wanted to what can I bring up here that is going to kind of hit home and actually maybe make a difference for somebody. And to me, it's introspection. To me, it's learning and looking at yourself and figuring out how you can learn the best. Because I know not all of us are going to school. Not all of us have a teacher in front of us every day that we can ask questions to. So we have to learn to teach ourselves. And so how do we get over those things? And it's just, for me, it was always to get to know me. And that was kind of one of the biggest pieces. And I don't want to turn this to some, spiritual journey or anything like that, but I wanted to make sure I shared that, because to me, that's the biggest key for anybody to make it in anything that they want to do. So there's my little motivational speech for the day.
How do you recommend doing that, Sean? The kind of self-check introspection. Any thoughts?
That's a great question, Neil. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always been I always say for me, I always feel like when I talk in front of groups, I say for me all the time. And I guess I just like to specify that this was just my experience. This is not objective truth. But for me, it's always been, I've always kind of had that attitude. But a lot has helped me in my life when I've started to sit even just down and meditate, or sit down and reflect on my day. Sit down and look at other people and say, what do I need to work on? Or the biggest piece is when you're annoyed by something somebody else is doing. And usually that's a sign of, all right, I need to work on patience. I need to get better at maybe being more humble, and, so I can learn something from somebody. Maybe it's developing confidence. A big piece for me was getting confidence in my life and being able to try new things, be able to try video and not have any experience in it was a huge piece of it.
Oh, I'm muted. Does anybody have any questions at all? Or Sean, that's a great answer. And introspection is a super important thing, and being I'm gonna say self-critical sounds too harsh, but yeah, I mean, knowing where your faults are and trying to kind of to do something about them when needed. So
yeah, Neil, and I think another advantage of having the video out and doing video, whether it's live stream or not, is the graphics that you can pop up in there, the eye contact that even, I think everybody knows the Joe Rogan podcast is a huge one. And that's, he doesn't even talk to the camera. And I don't think a lot of people have that camera. I don't want to get in front of the camera and talk to it. But I mean, that's the beauty of recording your podcast. You get all this content and you actually don't have to technically be in front of the camera, or at least looking at it.
I am going to put myself in the spotlight too, because I'm noticing on our live stream it's just locked in. But we have somebody in the network who does the Joe Rogan. That's Sean Lewis, who when doing his podcast, he's not looking into the camera, and he creates an engaging podcast. So that's a great
Sean.
point
I feel like Sean should be the one doing this presentation. Let's what are some of the biggest things that you have gotten from doing your video podcast?
It's much the same as you. I think you did a great job of just covering the points, man. Really, I have nothing to add in that respect. It's spot on.
Well, I'll open up the. Well, first I'll check. Sean, are you all set? Should we open up
Yeah.
the floor for Q&A?
Absolutely.
All right. I'm going to pull off all these spotlights that I have put on all of us. And there we go. So we are back in kind of gallery mode. Whoever wants to ask questions, Sean's here to answer questions about podcasts, and we've got a number of other podcasters in the group here. So if anybody has any questions.
I've got a question for you, Sean. Walk us through the process of booking Gary V. Maybe talk about the experience and like did that help take your podcast? Just walk us through that whole story, because it's very uncommon to hear someone say something like that, man. He's obviously a legend in the influencer space. So
Yeah, I literally, I don't know if you remember when the pandemic happened, he started that Tea with Gary V thing. And he started every Thursday. He would do this. He just have people come on for 10 minutes at a time. And for an hour, he just talked to random people, but you had to like do his text message thing. And I literally just got up every day and just sent him a text message. The same one, just copied and pasted it until one of his team members finally saw it. And I got selected to go on there with him. And that's when I, shared a little with him of my story, whatever, and brought up I had a podcast and asked if he wanted to come on. And he was like, sure. So I didn't expect him to say yes, but he did. So that was pretty cool. And as far as like growth, I mean, it always gives you a spurt, right? The bigger, if you have a person on, but I mean, it always kind of went back down. I'd say I seen a smaller growth after obviously a handful of months after he was on it. But I mean, my podcast has always been very, I think, a smaller, tight knit kind of audience. But I mean, it was definitely awesome having him on. And it definitely, I ain't going to say it didn't help. It always helps to have somebody that big on.
Sean, I like hearing that story because I think it was Frank Sinatra's manager, but he literally called Frank Sinatra every day for 3 years. He picked up the phone, dialed the number, the assistant would pick up. He called every day for 3 years. Then he becomes Frank Sinatra's manager, and I forget his name, but he's just notorious as one of the best managers of all time. But it's that persistence, man. So it's cool to hear that story.
Yeah, I mean, persistence is another huge thing. I mean, failing over and over again and getting back up is another big piece we could add to being successful in any video production or anything.
I want to add one thing too, which, like, if you didn't ask Gary V, he wouldn't have been on, right? And that's something that, like, whenever you're looking at podcast guests, we've had this discussion in the group, looking to level up, right? Kind of putting out a couple of asks that maybe feel like the people might not know who you are, or they may or may not say yes is not a bad thing, because it just takes a second to ask, and the worst thing that happens is no, or can't get it scheduled or something like that, right? So,
or they just ignore you is usually what happens.
Yeah. That's true too. And I also wanted to speak to, it's not all about number of downloads or views. That's something that came up in Ben spoke. When was that, Ben? Was that the last meeting or the meeting before? A couple meetings ago?
I think it was the last one, a couple weeks ago.
And I think this came up there, but it's not about necessarily having 1 million, downloads or views or whatever it is. It's about getting that one right one that's going to move the needle, especially if you're doing it for business. So I think that, the smaller numbers are not always a bad thing. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, I think the podcast for me was never to get downloads or make money. It was always a networking tool for me. Yeah. Hey, I got a podcast, and I've met and developed so many awesome relationships from that. I think that's was probably a huge piece of it for me.
That's a good way to look at it. Excellent. Chris, I think you had your hand up. Do you want to ask a question? Oh, I think you might be muted. I'm not hearing you.
Oh, my fault. I turned down my interface. I'm sorry. My fault. Sean, do you do live or do you do recorded or both?
Yeah, I've never actually. I think I've been guests on live podcasts like this or in networking things like this, but no, I don't usually do them live.
Okay. You find it easier then to just, I guess, record it and edit and put it up on. Have you ever thought about doing that? Because each time you get real time engagement, or is that in your thought process at all?
It's something I've debated about doing actually over and over again. I think it's mainly been time thing. Honestly, I have a list of all these things I'm implementing, and it's kind of there, but it has not been one I fully went 100% on quite yet.
Okay, all right. I was just curious. I'll have to check it out.
You do a lot of live stuff too, right, Chris?
I do, yes. Generally once a week, for the most part. It's sometimes hard to get people locked to a time slot. Because I like to do it Tuesdays around lunchtime. That seems to be a good time for people, or at least for viewers anyway. But yeah, I like doing live because you do get the questions, you do get the interaction, and it's just a different element. You can create a LinkedIn live event around it, and it also goes on YouTube and all of that. Now, I want to ask you also about YouTube. You say you started growing when you went on YouTube, and you weren't on it prior, I guess, and you got.
I did a few like mental health videos. Just really it was more of a test the YouTube waters. But once, I started putting my podcast right up on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I see better results when I do put the video podcast on YouTube as opposed to like just a picture. I see much better results with that. But yeah, I've gotten a lot of people that actually download and listen to my podcast that have said they came across it on YouTube.
Oh,
so,
nice. Yeah. Well, then that's where video helps. I mean, it's a bit, as everybody was saying, and as Neil keeps saying too, it's a video world, and here we are,
Yes, it is.
Good answers. Thank you.
To contribute to that too, Google, Google and YouTube, top 2 search engines on the web. So you put something on a Google property, they enjoy that, right? So, and then I had something about your lives, Chris, but I lost it. So maybe I'll come back to it. But yeah, Chris is the most experienced live person, I think, in the room right now. So if we have questions there, that works well.
Forgot my bow tie tonight.
Oh my goodness. I didn't even notice until you said something.
I got it in the background here though on the graphics.
Yeah, it's on the graphic. Excellent. Does anybody else have any questions for Sean or podcasting in general? And if we don't, I'm going back to my notes.
I'll ask one quick question. So, Sean, you're doing video and audio. You obviously don't want to spam people. Like, you can only post so much. Do you share the video? Do you share the audio? How do you know what content to share? Like, what is your go-to in terms of sharing the content?
As far as like sharing it, obviously, you mean like just on any social site in general?
Yeah, I was asking in general, but if you have tactics for specific sites, that would help too. But it's like it's a Wednesday, you're about to share it. What are you sharing where? Like, do you share the audio, the video? Do you have a strategy behind what works best for you? Yeah,
I mean, I guess I would say I have found my sweet spots analytically, what have worked for me, and which I would assume is probably generally around the same thing for everybody. Certain times on Fridays, want to wait till Sundays, Mondays. I found good results on Sundays. I found more not when, but if I do it consistently at that time over and over again, I get better results. I've seen numbers drop drastically when I randomly switch up my uploads, especially when it comes to longer form stuff like podcasts and longer form videos. I have found if I consistently upload those at the same time, the same day, like scheduled to post at this time, I start getting a lot more interactions. I think people just end up, seeing, knowing that you're going to be there, and they go to it. Like, all right, I know there'll be a podcast Monday. I'll listen to it on my way to work.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Any other questions out there? Okay. Well, I do have a question then. You mentioned that your podcast has been good for networking. Do you monetize it in any way? You said you don't get a ton of views. You don't do any product placement or advertisements or anything like that, right?
Nope. I have not. I don't know. I never even looked into, to be honest, Neil, of monetizing my podcast.
Yeah.
I think I've always loved having great conversations with people. So that was a reason. And again, that really just the networking piece was I've gotten so much work from just meeting people, allowing them to get to know me, having a cool conversation with them. And they're like, oh, I like this guy. Because somebody will hire me, even if somebody more talented is applying for that same, contract. Somebody would take me if they know me and they trust me. And, I think that always goes a long way as well. I've done a lot of old fashioned networking over the last 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the no like trust factor, right? You're not going to beat that. And part of the reason I bring it up is I think some folks probably have that as a goal where it's like, well, I'm going to get to 1 million downloads and I'm going to be selling ads or whatever. And it's a tough goal to achieve, right? You can get a lot quicker and more consistent probably results, especially early on, just by talking to people. Well, this is to go back to Ben's presentation again, right? Like talking to the right people and making the right connections through a medium like a podcast. So that's interesting. All right, let's see if I have anything else here. Consistency is difficult is the note I wrote down. How do you keep up? I mean, that we've talked about it a little bit. How do you, how often are you releasing your podcasts? And how do you keep that schedule, right? Are you getting them done way beforehand or whatever?
Yeah, it's been a lot. Honestly, it's been a lot more challenging for me since I've started an actual full-time job and not doing just freelance work anymore. And I have to actually keep a schedule. So it's definitely been more challenging, but I mean, I've done every Monday for, I don't know how long. I think it's been a while with a few weeks missing here and there, but I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know. I guess I'm still learning it. I'm still pulling my damn hair out all the time, trying to master it and figure it out, to be quite honest. But it really, I mean, I kind of swing it back to that whole keep getting better at it, keep getting up, is because I keep struggling all the time with consistently creating something and putting it out there. And really, it's just kind of making sure I do it. I have to have a tight schedule with everything in my life in order for me to do it. So, I mean, really, it's just once you kind of get in the swing of it, I think it becomes a lot easier, but it's really just kicking yourself in the ass and making yourself do it.
So that Monday release, when's that podcast finished, right? When's the file finalized?
When's it finished? Yeah, depending on, COVID, I was so ahead of the game. It was awesome. I mean, granted, they were all remote podcasts, but it's so ahead of the game. But I like to stay about anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. I honestly don't like to get too much further ahead of that. Not that I talk a lot of current events, but I don't know what it is. It's like watching a sports event on DVR after it's already went on and you don't know the score. But you still, it's like the score's already out there. What am I going to sit down for 3 hours and watch this for? So,
yeah, all right, excellent. What's the closest you ever cut it? Right? Did you finish something and upload it right away? And
oh yeah, all the time. Do that with projects all the time. I do that everything. Yep.
Excellent. Yeah, that definitely happens.
I'm pretty sure that's a prerequisite for being a creative person.
Yes. If you're a creative, you're going to bring it down to the wire for sure, for sure. All right. Anybody else have any other questions? Otherwise, I think I'm going to do final kind of comments here, and we will close out the official meeting. Last call. Last call. All right. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Sean, for chatting with the group. I think we got some great information there. And when you that was another thing I was going to bring up. When you do a podcast, you want it to be video. Sean, you got that part right. Good job. So, and thank you to all of you who joined us via live stream or on the replay. Again, don't miss that next meeting, which is coming up 11/18 at 8 p.m. Eastern. Grant Tellick is presenting Don't Let Your Content Fizzle and Die. It's time to repurpose. Find the link on our company page under the events tab, or I'll actually move that link into the description for this live cast as well. Have a good